We ready to start then?
This meeting is being recorded.
Got it. Okay, aloha and welcome everybody. I want to thank you for joining us today. Your presence is so important to our community because unless people get together and talk to each other, there is no community actually. We have two very interesting people today, but before we get started, some brief announcement I would like to make. First, our next community meeting will be Saturday, the 23rd of April, 1 to 3, and it will be on Zoom. And our guest presenter for that day will be Jani Wase. She's a teacher, a principal, and an author of 2 books. Leading with Aloha is one of them, and most recently she wrote Educating with Aloha. It will be an informative and interesting meeting. Plan to join us and feel free to invite your friends and reach out to educators and invite them to be part of that meeting, okay? It's very important. And I want you to have a heads up about I'm thinking about starting up the in-person meetings in a couple months anyway. And I have some interesting possibilities as guests for those meetings. And one of them may be on Hawaiian spirituality. And I think that may be a very big draw. But anyway, be aware. I'm assuming all of you live on Oahu, in the Honolulu area, the downtown area, or out in the urban area. So coming to Manoa, if we can get Manoa, it shouldn't be a big problem, right? Anybody else have any difficulty?
Lonnie has written into the chat, Lonnie Bowman, that she's on the Big Island.
Oh, Lonnie, okay.
And just Lonnie, so you know, we have some regular members who are on Maui. And so we are talking about trying to figure out how to do a simultaneous Zoom option with a live meeting. And so we're just kicking around, what will that require of us? And can we produce it every gathering? So it shouldn't be too hard, but it's not all been figured out yet.
Okay, well, that's in the works in terms of thinking and maybe doing if we can.
Hey, Jimmy, can I just invite people to just put into the chat if you're someone who would like us to have a Zoom option, even if you're in Honolulu, just so we can get a sense of how many folks like the option to come in by Zoom and don't know if they would be always coming to attend. So we'd love to hear from you in the chat if you can share your thought. So I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, thank you. Yeah, so we're keeping that option open, and also if we can record the community meeting, we can then play it on the website, like how we're going to do, I think, right, Arlene? I think that's very important.
Yeah, we'll put it on our Mindful Hawaii YouTube channel and then link that up to the website and send that out to the group as a follow-up email message after the meeting.
Yeah, very good. I think that will be very powerful. Anybody have any other thoughts on meeting in person? I'm saying this because it looks like the restrictions on COVID is coming down, but doesn't mean that COVID is disappearing. So we will have to continue to be cautious, but then it may allow us to be a little bit more flexible in terms of meeting in person. So so we'll have to continue to think about it and work on it and plan for it. But the in-person community meetings have been so vital, I think, to Mindful Hawaii. I know that when we were doing that regularly, people were always looking forward to coming together every month to get together and have conversations about different things. And I'm hoping that we can do that again soon. Okay. You have any questions, Meredith or Richard? Meredith? Yeah.
We're good. We're good. It's good to be here.
Oh, good. Good to have you. You too, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. What were you asking me? I was responding to a text.
Oh, no, I was talking to other Richard. Meredith's Richard. Not Richard
Oh,
Hennessy.
okay.
But that's okay. You have anything to say?
About meeting in person?
Yeah.
I like the idea.
Okay. I like seeing you in person. All
Thank
right.
you, Jimmy. Aloha.
Okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
Jimmy?
Yeah.
Just a second. I gotta turn the computer off. Just a second. Yeah, it's Clark Martin.
Hi,
I'm
hey, Clark.
under
How's it?
Karen Roeder's name on somebody else's computer, but I just arrived a few minutes ago from Washington State.
Right.
Looking forward to the meeting today.
Great. I know the Zoom is going to be
can't
very
hear you.
important for you, right? The Zoom. Can you hear me? Living in Washington, I know the Zoom will be a very
Sorry, I
important.
can't hear anything. I'm doing something wrong.
Oh, okay.
Does your computer have to be on?
No,
I can hear you though.
because it's on your computer. I'll get back after I figure out what's going on. Oh,
Okay,
your
fine.
phone.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts? None? Okay. Let's get started with today's talk. Okay, but anyway, at this moment in time, let me just say that I am very sad that Ukraine continues to be front and center in our lives. Over the past month, I've heard many well-intentioned and well thought out comments about Ukraine and the fallout from it. But for me, I choose to experience the pain, the suffering, the uncertainty and worry in my na'au, which is my gut. It's simply my way of responding to all that is Ukraine, not just in my mind or intellect, but in the center of my being. And I think it's very important that we all try to do the same, which is not only think thoughtful things, but also feel the pain and the suffering deep in ourselves. And I think that way the words like freedom and liberty will have, an emotional soundness to it, okay? But that's coming from you. And we very often leave important conversations and thinking simply in our minds, and we leave it and we forget that there is that spiritual part about the response that we forget to do that. And in a way, I think that's what today's conversation will kind of lead up to in a way. It'll show us how important that is and how foundational it is to human life. And that spirituality that I think we're going to hear about is something that is very appropriate to a very diverse and pluralistic world that we live in our society. There are many different avenues to truth,
Other talk is gone.
to finding the path, truth, and there are many paths, but there is only one source. And then I think Father Thomas Keating and his crew of confreres, I think, mentioned that we all have this belief in an absolute reality, but we all have different names for it. And I think you will hear that today. And I think that's very important. So what that does is it helps us to cut down the idea of I am this way and you're that way, and that the twain shall never meet. But it'll remind us that what connects us is our basic humanity, and we must never forget that. Okay. Today we have two very interesting people talking, and I think you already know them. I understand that Carol and June will kind of reveal more about themselves as they go along in the program. And so instead of, as I customarily do, is say a little bit more about the presenters, I will forego that today, and so that I don't undercut the revelations of who they are as people in the course of their presentation. So why don't I, without any further ado, turn this over to Carol and June, who will lead us in today's interesting presentation of Father Thomas Keating. Okay, so Carol and June, the show is yours.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm going to introduce Father Keating, and then June's going to give some background on the Christian contemplative tradition, the beginnings of centering prayer and contemplative outreach, and including here in Hawaii. And then I'm going to share on Father Keating's work on interreligious dialogue. And then June and I are going to share our personal stories, because Father Keating talks about how important it is to share with one another our stories. And then we're going to break up into small groups and ask you all to share your stories with one another, and perhaps talk about how other religions have influenced you on your journey. So that's kind of the breakout for today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me. So Father Thomas Keating was a Trappist monk of St. Benedict's Monastery in Snowmass, Colorado. He was born in New York City in 1923, and he died in 2018. He is one of the world's most widely recognized and revered teachers of contemplative and mystical dimensions of Christian spirituality. He traveled the world to speak with lay people and communities about contemplative Christian practices and the psychology of the spiritual journey. He is one of the founders of the Centering Prayer Movement and Contemplative Outreach, an organization designed to foster the Christian contemplative tradition through the practice of centering prayer. He is the convener of the Snowmass Interreligious Conference, which started in 1984. When he invited a group, which started in 1984 when he invited a group of contemplatives from 8 different religious traditions to gather at the monastery in Snowmass and engage in what he called the big experiment. So now I'm just going to play a short 2-minute clip video that further introduces Thomas Keating, and it's a clip from a documentary about Father Keating that's called A Rising Tide of Silence.
The interesting thing about Thomas is that he's become known as someone who transcends the boundaries of his own background and experience. He's had a tremendous influence, maybe more than any other Christian, in world religious dialogue.
Father Thomas Keating is one of the most well-known contemplative Christian scholars and writers, a best-selling author and well-known throughout the world.
He was a breakthrough. Thomas Keating completely turned the whole Trappist orientation from asceticism to contemplation.
He's a transformative figure, more than people recognize, certainly the church recognizes.
He must have experienced God in a very, very deep way, in a totally transcendent way, and wants to share that with the world.
He's not speaking Catholic doctrine. He is using Catholic doctrine to speak universally.
Our project is not just to become a better human being, as desirable as that would be for our friends and relatives, but it's to become a divine human being, or to learn how to live human life in a divine way, The project is the transformation of individuals and, at some point, the whole human family. The gift of God is absolute.
Okay, and with that, I'll turn it over to June, who will talk a little bit about what's happening locally. June?
June will be here in a moment.
Well, maybe while we're waiting for June, I could go back to the slide and talk about how he got started.
Okay.
June, are you there?
I'm here now. Thank you.
Okay, I'll stop share. There you go. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Sorry I disappeared. My primary focus is really to kind of look at contemplative prayer and how it got, what tradition that we have in the Christian faith and how it developed. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, to say that all major religions have a contemplative or more mystical part or sect to it. The Kabbalah is with the Jewish people. The Zen is with the Buddhist people. Sufis are with the Muslims. And for the Christians, we usually call this the contemplatives. And we usually have them in the monasteries and the convents. And that's where we, that whole tradition got started with the Desert Fathers who went away and went into silence. And one of the things that is a feature of contemplative prayer is silence, and which is something that is common. What is prayer, though? In one sense, this whole thing is a very common term in the Christian tradition, prayer. For the Catholics, it's an active expression of one's relationship with God. And for me, connecting with God, connecting with it, my inner sense, my inner self, with this God who dwells within and is everywhere, is part of what I feel is part of this Catholic, part of this Christian tradition, following the teachings of Jesus Christ. When I Googled contemplative prayer, as we do in the modern era now, I got two versions. The first version I read, I was a little puzzled because this is what it said. Contemplative prayer is no different than the meditative exercises used in the Eastern religions and the New Age cults practices. Its most vocal supporters embrace an open spirituality. Contemplative prayer is practiced in the modern prayer movement. It is in opposition to biblical Christianity and should definitely be avoided. And I got really puzzled about that. And then I realized that that was written by a more evangelical Christian. So then I Googled down a little further and it says, contemplative prayer, Catholic. And so I read that one, and this is what it says. Contemplative prayer, as the Catechism of the Catholic Church outlines, it quotes Teresa of Avila, one of the church's masters in the school of contemplation. So this prayer is nothing else than a close sharing between friends. It means taking time frequently to be alone with God, who we know loves us. Contemplative prayer seeks God whom my soul loves. It is Jesus, and in him, the Father. We seek God because to desire God is always the beginning of love. So there are two versions or two ideas of what contemplative prayer is and they're both Christian in origin. So that's really, really confusing to many people who try to find out what this tradition is about. But I want to say something about my own background. I'm what is called a rocking horse Catholic. Many of you have heard about cradle Catholics, but a rocking horse Catholic is someone who is not born into the faith. My mother and father were both immigrants from China, and so therefore I had a kind of a more, let's say, secular growing up. But I went to a Catholic school and I really embraced the Roman Catholic Church. And so I followed that all along. But because I'm 85 years old, 84 yet, I was part of the old school, the old traditional Catholic Church for 40 years of my life. And I learned that people who contemplate were saints, and that most people, most ordinary people, don't do contemplation. It's for those people. And that prayer is really vocal, something you do with your voice, your singing, or your body, and not so much your body, or you meditate. That means to reflect and to think about the teachings of Jesus Christ. Contemplation is reserved for monks, for nuns, and so those people who really dedicate their lives to this God, and you go away for that. You're not an ordinary person. Well, as a rocking horse Catholic, who learned Catholicism through the schools and followed it through the way, I wondered about all of this. But when I went away, during the 50s, the Roman Catholic Church had a very distinct change in their attitude towards prayer. This was started by John the 23rd, Pope John the 23rd, who was very instrumental in opening the windows for the Catholic Church. And I don't know if some of you have heard about this, but it liberalized and freed many of the Catholics to enter into this more contemplative aspect of the church. There was, however, a more conservative portion of the Catholic Church and a very, very more conservative part of the Protestant Church that said this contemplation is not for the ordinary people. And but when Teilhard de Chardin, who was a scientist and a Jesuit, and you know Jesuits are very, very high on the totem pole of the Catholic Church, when he wrote that God is everywhere, and when Thomas Merton sought God everywhere also, and he wrote his story about how he discovered this contemplative part of life and God in all of life. And when he shared that with everyone, there was a large group of Roman Catholics who went back into the history of Roman Catholic spirituality. They went back to St. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila and Ignatius Loyola, and reignited this interest in contemplation for the ordinary people. But Father Keating was really instrumental in bringing this method of centering prayer, which we call the method of contemplative prayer, the method of centering prayer, which leads to contemplative prayer. Father Keating wrote a lot of books on opening your heart and opening your doors to this God who is everywhere and in you. And that changed the perspective because his books became more popular. Centering prayer is a simple method to contemplative prayer. It's based on the Psalm 46, which says, "Be still and know that I am God." It's also based on what Jesus said. He says, "Go to the inner room, close the door, and pray to the Father in private." Basically, centering prayer uses silence as its base, encourages silence, encourages 2 periods of silence every day, and uses a sacred word that is repeated when thoughts come into your mind, and to help you let go of these thoughts. By sitting regularly as a discipline of showing up to be present to God, it was portrayed as something everybody can do. What was really interesting for me is this all happened around the 1950s, when there were the Hare Krishnas, there were the est, transcendental meditation. There's a whole shift in this. So in one sense, we said, there's talk about the age of Aquarius, the post-wars, the peacetime awareness of moving towards peace and openness. And so I was caught in all of this movement, joining a group called of Catholics who just sat in silence. We learned this silence, basically, many of us learned it from the Buddhists. But when Sister Catherine went to join Father Keating in a retreat, she came back and told a group of us, there is a new movement that is spreading widely. And this movement is called the Centering Prayer Group. So this Centering Prayer Group that Father Keating started with us helped to galvanize a large group here in Hawaii under the umbrella of the Contemplative Outreach organization. And so there are materials and ways in which we support one another. This is something that Carol and I are part of. I lead a group with its emphasis on silence and gratefulness and prayer. We meet Monday nights, and the group also meets once a month to support one another. So contemplative prayer is the umbrella way of opening ourselves up to God, and through a Christian method, using Christ as our leader. centering prayer is only one of these methods. And there are other methods in which this opening then becomes more prominent in our lives. Carol, I wonder if you have anything else to say on this?
No, thank you, June, for that background.
Okay.
I'm gonna,
okay, go ahead.
okay. So now we'll move to talk about Father Keating's interreligious work. So I'm gonna share my screen again. So Thomas Keating's interest in interreligious work started before the 1970s, and he invited speakers from other religious traditions to his monastery, which at that time was in Spencer, Massachusetts, and he was the abbot there. And a half hour up the hill from where his monastery was a large insight meditation center with a lot of outstanding Vipassana teachers, and it was run by Ashen Cha. And that was about the time that Father Keating noticed a lot of young people who were coming up to the Insight Meditation Center who grew up in Christian churches and Christian schools. And he would say, "You're Christians, aren't you? Why aren't you following the Christian path?" And they would say, "What path? You know, can you give us a brochure?" And as June said earlier, that tradition of the Christian religion ended up in monasteries and religious orders and not out in the public. So he began to realize that there was a need. And that's when they started formalizing centering prayer. But he and Ashen Cha at the Insight Meditation Center could compare notes because they had similar concerns with issues that they were dealing with in their monasteries. But Thomas Keating thought that Ashen Cha was friendliness himself. And then another relationship he had at his monastery in Spencer was with Joshu Roshi Sasaki, who is from the Mount Balding area in Los Angeles. And he proposed doing a session for Father Keating and his monks, and Father Keating accepted. And that's an intensive period of meditation. And he continued to come back twice a year for 10 years to lead Father Keating and the monks in sessions. And to Sasaki, Zen was not the property of Japan or even of Buddhism, but a basic universal religious attitude. And Father Keating really admired that perspective. And so he adopted that point of view in his own life. The monastery also hosted Swami Satchidananda and several teachers from Transcendental Meditation movement. And you just see the dates on the slide of when centering prayer started in the Snowmass Conference. So the ideas for what Thomas Keating called the big experiment came after he took part in a series of Christian Buddhist dialogues at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. He noticed the dialoguers were not speaking to each other. They were more addressing a broader audience. And on a couple of occasions, the moderator brought the speakers together a day before the conference, and they got to talk to one another as peers. And Father Keating began to wonder, what would happen if we got together and talked without any audience, and it was just us sharing peer to peer? And what would happen if we opened it up so it wasn't just Buddhists and Christians, but included others? And that's what sparked the idea for the gathering. And the first one was held at his monastery in Snowmass, Colorado, which is how it got the name Snowmass Conference. And so now I'm going to play a 4-minute video that was made for Naropa University one of the times when Father Keating was not physically able to attend the conference. So I'll play that now.
I'd like to say just a word about the spirit of interspiritual dialogue. It's so important for the peace of this world, a peace that we may not fully experience for some centuries even, but which could be accelerated if the spirit of interreligious dialogue can be fully established by conferences like these and extended into more and more places in the world. I venture to say that this is almost a key to the transformation of society and to peace and justice issues insofar as they're humanly possible in this world. I'm convinced that the dialogue has already reached the point where it's not enough to simply respect and listen patiently to others' presentation of their religious beliefs. What the sharing of spiritual experience is, which is possible, of course, for those who are deeply advanced in the one or other spiritual paths in their respective religion, is that the ultimate reality, or sometimes in the Christian and Jewish traditions, a reality we call God, this presence, the source of everything that is, that which underlies and accompanies every moment of space and time, this is the mystery and the reality that the human heart is seeking, and which it has a radical capacity to find in view of the innate character of contemplation as a possibility for every human being. So now what needs to be added to the spiritual dialogue or interreligious dialogue is to love other religions. By that I mean to see in them the work of the Holy Spirit, if you use a Christian perspective, but the presence of ultimate reality. And this is the oneness of all creation that all the traditions or religions are seeking by various paths, and which involve a certain transcendence of any particular path. And this transcendence is the common patrimony of all the great spiritual traditions, and also those other paths by which God leads people to himself, such as nature, the generous service of others, friendship, love, genuine science, which is now revealing so much about how the world functions at the deepest level.
Here is a list of the first group of spiritual teachers to gather in 1984. The group included Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, Jewish, Islamic, Native American, Russian Orthodox, Protestant, and Roman Catholic. And at Snowmass, they would gather for a week or so each year, a retreat setting, sharing meals together, meditating in silence together, having dialogue sessions, and enjoying free time. There was no audience to impede the intimacy of the dialogue. They kept no records and published no papers. They shared their personal spiritual journeys with each other, especially those elements in their respective traditions that had proven most helpful to them along the way. As the trust and friendship grew, they felt moved to investigate various points that they seemed to agree on. Oops. And here's a sample of the daily schedule. The schedule was designed to, be in a retreat format, so they would have a sense of being on retreat with lots of time for meditating in silence together and private time for hiking, resting, reading, and enjoying nature. Here's a list of some of the places that they have gathered over the years. They tried to meet in spiritual settings with a spiritual community. Those holy spaces are already there. They didn't have to create the atmosphere. There's, in those kinds of places, there's intentional architecture and building and a sense of spiritual energy. The holy spaces were helpful to their retreat process. The spaces they selected were a lot more inviting and had a feeling of community, versus being in a hotel. They were a closer knit group of people that way. Father Keating shares in an article the outcomes he experienced as a result of these gatherings over the years. More respect and understanding of other world religions, more openness and admiration for their methods and teachings, a sense of communion with the people who are practicing them, and it greatly expanded his own worldview and understanding of the Christian religion and has deepened and enriched his understanding. And he shared that he found a lot of insights in the dialogue that helped him to better understand the Bible and explain it from a contemplative perspective. One of the things they all worked on over the years as they met was a list of points of agreement. And those points of agreement were in a handout in the email, so you have a copy of them that you can refer to later if you wish. And I was just going to go through the first 8 points of agreement. The world religions bear witness to the experience of ultimate reality, to which they give various names. Ultimate reality cannot be limited to any name or concept. Ultimate reality is the ground of infinite potentiality and actualization. Faith is opening, accepting, and responding to ultimate reality. Faith is the sense precedes every belief system. The potential for human wholeness, or in other frames of reference for enlightenment, salvation, transcendence, transformation, or blessedness, is present in every human being. Ultimate reality may be experienced not only through religious practices, but also through nature, art, human relationships, and service to others. As long as the human condition is experienced as separate from ultimate reality, it is subject to ignorance and illusion, weakness and suffering. And disciplined practice is essential to the spiritual life. Yet spiritual attainment is not a result of one's own efforts, but the result of the experience of oneness with ultimate reality. Now, it's a mouthful, and I get the sense when I read it that they had to find words to use that resonated with all the different perspectives coming from the various religions and cultures. But I think what's said here is quite remarkable. There are more points of agreement in the document that was attached to the invitation. And they also share, and this group shared these points of agreement with all of us as a gift to anyone who will welcome them and who will use them to promote understanding. And also in the points of agreement are some examples of practices that are common to all, and also some practices that certain traditions have. And I'll just show the list of the practices that are common to all. Compassion, service to others, practicing moral precepts and virtues, training in meditation techniques and regularity of practice, attention to diet and exercise, fasting and abstinence, the use of music, chanting, and sacred symbols, pilgrimages, and the study of texts and scripture. So feel free to review those in your handouts if you want to take a closer look or see what else is listed there. Now, this is the point in our agenda, June, where we share our stories. Would you like to share a little bit more about your spiritual journey? You're muted. There
Thank
you
you,
go.
Carol. The first part of our sharing featured Father Keating and his efforts to restoring the contemplative tradition and make it more accessible to Christians throughout to common Christians, to people like all what we call lay people, through the use of the centering prayer. The second part's all about Father Keating's interreligious work, and it broke open the insularity of many of our traditions had for many, many years, because we said, well, okay, I'm not a Buddhist. I don't want to have anything to do with Buddhists. I'm going to stick with this, my own tradition. But we're beginning to realize that all traditions point to the same ultimate reality and seek the good of all human beings. And it is in this spirit that talking story is important. And what we will do is to share our own story first. Carol and I will talk about how the Spirit has moved us to become more contemplative and by seeking silence. Then we're going to ask you to share, if you wish, your story, and perhaps some of the way we share would spark some ideas within your own journey. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. As I first said, I was a rocking horse Catholic, which meant that I learned all about Christianity through school, and also later in life, where I followed a more contemplative trend because of the way silence attracted me. But I was really considering myself as a very good Roman Catholic. I kept all the rules, followed the way, felt like Jesus was going to be my savior. But Carl Jung said that when we enter our 30s and 40s, life, especially the more hidden aspects of our life, that spirit part, takes on a new challenge. I was right on schedule because in the mid-30s, I began to wonder and ponder my whole belief structure. Kind of, did I want to be a Roman Catholic? Who is this God? Who is this Jesus that died on this cross, and why did he do that? My Chinese heritage kind of kicked in at this time, because looking back at who I was as an Asian, I must be genetically connected to Lao Tzu and Confucius, and so therefore maybe I'm more Confucian and should follow that way. But Confucius and Lao Tzu lived a long life. They didn't get martyred. I didn't want to get martyred. So maybe I should become a Buddhist. But then I realized that Buddhism had also become an institution, like the Catholic Church, an institution that kind of had its good parts and its bad parts, its sins and its heaven. And so I decided then, okay, maybe there's something in this Catholic Church. But I did take some meditation classes from the Buddhists, and I really liked that. And when I read texts like St. John of the Cross or Teresa of Avila, who talked about contemplation and silence, I became much more interested in this aspect of Christianity, this aspect of Catholicism. But I also realized that I was more on the fringe, because even at that time, during the late 60s, 70s, and even early 80s, to be contemplative was kind of a no-no. And I decided that if Jesus did what he did and died for it, I guess I could do what I did, and maybe I don't have to die for it. But what I could do is embrace the God who is love and try to live more deeply this message that Christ said: love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. And in integrating all of that, that is a contemplative life, and that's okay. That's my story. So Carol, you want to share your story?
Sure. Thank you, June. I grew up in a Protestant church in Waimea on the island of Kauai, and I moved away to go to college, but got really homesick for Hawaii. So in 1982, I made Honolulu my home, and I've had a career here in information technology and healthcare, and I'm retired now, and I volunteer with Contemplative Outreach, and I'm very active in my church, which is Central Union Church, which is the same kind of church I grew up in on Kauai, and I attended regularly because my parents were both church musicians for their entire lives. Well, when I was in my 40s, so that fits with June's timeline, I felt like I had it all: loving husband, 2 wonderful daughters, satisfying job, a home. I was active in my church and with volunteer work, but I had this, what felt like a big hole, a yearning or a desire for something deeper that I could feel in my heart, and I didn't know what it was, but I was searching, and it seemed to draw me towards silence and stillness. So I'd go to the bookstore when Barnes and Noble was around my neighborhood and scan the spiritual bookshelves. And being in the Christian tradition, I was trying to find something Christian, but I just really couldn't find anything. So I landed on Thich Nhat Hanh's wonderful books and wonderful, clear, concise practices that he explained so gently and lovingly, and started doing those practices and still do some of them today. Then one day I heard a guest speaker at my church, and something he said, I don't even remember what, struck me. So after his talk, I went up and talked to him, and he said, come and take my class. He was about to start a 6-week class at the church, and go buy Thomas Keating's book called Open Mind, Open Heart. And sure enough, it was there at the bookstore. And so I went to the class, and that's where I met Sister Catherine Tyler, who is the Maryknoll sister that June mentioned that started the Contemplative Outreach and Centering Prayer movement here in Hawaii. And I just knew from the moment of meeting her and learning about centering prayer and contemplative Christian tradition that that is what I had been looking for. And from that moment forward, I've been practicing centering prayer and have been involved with contemplative outreach at the local level and at the international level, and feel very happy to have discovered it. Felt like accidental, but I'm sure it was not. And I don't have that hole in my heart anymore because I have daily connections with my practice in this centering prayer method that I do. And I, my first teacher was Thich Nhat Hanh. I use contemplative and mindful interchangeably. This mindful tradition of centering prayer, and of mindful practices, and which led me to centering prayer. So I have a very special place in my heart for him. And I have such gratitude. And I can relate to what Father Keating said when he was sharing his outcomes from being involved in the Christian, in the big experiment. He talked about how his view of the Christian religion began to expand and be enriched by getting to know other religions, and getting insights from those other religions also helped him to better understand the contemplative perspectives of the Bible and the Christian tradition. And I find that to be very true too. And I really enjoy reading and getting to know contemplative or mindful traditions from mindful practices and ideas from other traditions, because they feed my own journey. So now we'd like to break into groups of maybe 5 people, Arlene. And we're going to break for 15 minutes into groups for 15 minutes. And we'd like you to share your stories with one another, and also what your, experience, or how other religions have maybe touched you, or your experience has been with other religions, if any. And June, anything to add?
No, yes, because everybody's path is kind of a little different, and it would be whatever happens, just allow the Spirit to kind of move you.
And then when we come back together, we'll ask for volunteers to maybe share something you heard that was, if you wish to share a little bit of your story with the larger group too.
I'd like to remind everybody, though, that whatever is shared in your group, please remember that it should be confidential. We could share something that is open, but we really don't want to go beyond that.
So Arlene, would you be willing to break us into groups of 5 for about 15 minutes?
Yep, I'll start the groups right now.
Thank you.
recorded.
I didn't get to finish my story in the group.
Yeah, we didn't get to hear the rest, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you later when I see you.
Oh, shucks.
Oh, my. Where's Carol and June? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. This is Carol.
Okay.
And there's June.
Oh, June's there too. Good.
So we probably could have used more time. So now we want to open it up to any comments anyone wants to share from their story from their group, or any connection or influence from another religion that you know has helped you in your journey, or maybe share what practices you use or how other religions have influenced your journey.
Carol, I just want to invite people, if you're not seeing everyone, like in the Brady Bunch boxes, if you go up to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and find the word view, it'll let you toggle between what's called gallery view or speaker view. And if you want to see everybody who's here, so you feel like you're in the room with everyone, hit gallery view.
Thank you, Marina. I appreciate that. Well, in our group, people, at least 3 people shared or more their connection with Thich Nhat Hanh and his practices as being very accessible, and making other things more understandable. Marina?
I didn't get the chance to share my story, but I did notice with others who shared their story that there's some common denominators with Joseph Campbell. And sort of wherever, given the times, wherever world we came out of, at some point we ran into Joseph Campbell, and he connected all the dots in a similar way to what you're talking about today, and then opened up curiosity.
Yeah, and the Joseph Campbell organization, I can't remember the name, but they do, if you use mindfulness as a generic term, videos that are very accessible, I think, to young people too. Maybe I can forward that link on to Jimmy to share with the community.
Thank you.
That'd be good, yes.
Yeah, that always
very
good. Yeah, so it's interesting to hear your group was talking about Thich Nhat Hanh. I got a book I was supposed to read. My inner self told me to read it, but I haven't read it yet. It's Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. It's probably, I guess, one of his last contributions in written form, noting that unfortunately he passed on maybe 60 days ago, 50 days. It was recent, but looking forward to reading that book. And, it lines up with, one of the issues that came up in the group I was in, which was a little bit of sadness about humanity and its situation with the planet, and how mindfulness, at least being aware of that and trying to act on it in a positive way is something at least was mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. Mm-hmm.
Just have to, a little aside, Joseph Campbell's wife was from Hawaii. And when I was little, they used to come up, and she was a ballerina. And I was just enthralled with her. And he was just Uncle Joe. And then, I'm not bragging, but anyway, but later on I went, hey, but he is an incredible person. But anyway, small world, those 2 degrees of separation, right? And I just want to add, I think, any time spiritually we get with people with, like Father Keating did, at retreats, at it, whatever the retreat is, that is just so feeling the presence of whatever, the spirit, the power. And one of mine, and with the Catholic Church, is Cursillo. And that kind of really changed my life. And I think I became a deacon in the Episcopal Church, mainly because of the bad rap that people of faith have. And that was, social justice is a real big thing with us. And I just so emulate with Father Keating and with all of us that it's not about, it's like I said in our sharing, it's not about your faith practice, right? It's you find it in nature, you find it in others. And I was sharing the book Caste, excellent book that I would suggest reading, Caste, and especially her epilogue, talking about not merely tolerating, but how can we cross those barriers? And there's so many barriers, and how can we cross them in love? And it's really, so thank you.
Yeah, it seems like that experience you were describing with Christio, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, is, to me shows up its experience of how we are all one and we are all connected. Yeah. Okay, well, I don't think there's any problem oh, go ahead, Jimmy. You're muted.
I just wanted to share very quickly about coming into contact with the Thomas Keating, anyway, his works. When I started out forming Mindful Hawaii, we had this gentleman who stepped forward, and he created this logo for us for Mindful Hawaii. And there's the words, there are 3 words there. There's a turtle, and then there's words there. And the 3 words are many truths, many paths, one source. And keeping that in mind, when I met Carol, and Carol introduced me to the Thomas Keating's book, I read the Common Core, or the Common Agreements, and I read that, and I said, wow, this is very reflective of what we're trying to do with Mindful Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And so if anybody wonders about where we're going and what we're about, I think if you read the Common Agreement, or the Common Heart Agreement, you will kind of get to understand where Mindful Hawaii is coming from, and what it hopes to have in the world, which is, all of us coming from different places, but we're all from the same source, if you will. Thank you. I didn't mean to talk too much.
No, Jimmy, we're pretty much done here. I just have a couple more real short slides, but anybody else? Or Jimmy, you have time to say more if you wish.
Oh, I do.
Well, Marina just had her hand up, so let's.
Oh, I'm sorry, Marina. I didn't see that. Go ahead, Marina.
Okay, I just wanted to ask if it was possible to share with us the presentation was beautiful. I thank you both for this. Has been delicious. But the video of Thomas Keating was really so powerful. His message that you shared with us. So I didn't know if it was possible for us to have access to that, but I would love it.
The one from Naropa is online. I can send the link to that.
That's awesome.
And I think Rising Tide of Silence might be on Netflix or Prime Video. It's a documentary that's about an hour and a half long. It's a beautiful documentary.
I just thought you guys did a beautiful job of giving us a depth and breadth of something that's hard to talk about, and you did such a great job of sharing that with us today. I thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Marina. Richard?
Hi, Carol. If you're going to be sharing or sending along a link to a video, I would recommend sending along also the link to the video that was shown at the memorial service for Father Keating, that 19-minute video. I just think that's absolutely wonderful. So
Okay.
a thought. I also would like to pick up on something that June said about love, and how that was the teaching of Jesus. That's what he was teaching, was love God, love thy neighbor as thyself. And I remember Jack Kornfield once saying that the Buddha said there's only one question you're asked when you die, and that is, how well did you love? And here we are in Hawaii, and Hawaiian spirituality is based on aloha, and that word, when you come right down to it, means love. So to me, all spiritual traditions come back to love. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And somebody said they hadn't heard in our small group of centering prayer before. So I just wanted to let people know. Oh, I'm sorry. I see your hand up. Arlene, go ahead.
No, I was just applauding Richard's comment. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. There are 12 centering prayer groups on, I can't remember if it's Honolulu or if it's the statewide, but there are some on Kauai and Maui and the Big Island, and several on Oahu. And so in that, when we send out the link, I'll send you the website. There's a local CO for Contemplative Outreach Hawaii at I can't remember the but anyway, there's a section on community, and it shows all the groups, and if there's Zoom groups, it has links. There's also a meditation chapel, which is an international, and I know one of our facilitators here does a group on Monday night, and they have people from all over the world that are, in a time zone that works with Hawaii. It might be our evening here and their morning there. So there's lots of ways to connect with centering prayer and other meditation practices.
And Carol, you might mention the retreat in our group. Loki mentioned missing a retreat in the last couple of years, that we're going to have a retreat in August.
Yeah. And information on that kind of stuff is always on our website. But once at the third Saturday of every month, we do 3 30-minute sits with a silent break at Central Union Church, which is on Punahou and Beretania. And everyone is welcome. It doesn't matter your tradition. We sit in silence together, and you can do whatever your practice is in your silence. And if we have newcomers who want to learn a method of meditation, we take the newcomers and teach them the method of centering prayer. But all are welcome to the circle to do whatever their practice is. Okay. Unless there's anything else, June, you have any closing comments or?
No, I don't have any, but thank you very much for everyone for being here and kind of chiming in and listening to us and telling your story. I'm not sure everyone got to tell their story, but anyway, it was very interesting from what the stories that I've heard. Thank you.
Yeah, next time we know we can allow more time. I'm going to just share some closing slides. So at the end of the book that Jimmy was talking about is called A Common Heart, and I have a picture of it in a minute. But at the end of that, Father Keating really calls other religions of the world to contribute to the cause of peace by sharing teachings and practices from their traditions designed to foster the full development of the human person. And I think, the religious committee or whatever of Mindful Hawaii is the idea one of the ideas is for religions to work together to do this, within their traditions, to spread practices that are, what I would call mindful practices. Oops, and there's the information in this presentation today come from the book A Common Heart, which talks about the Snowmass Conference, and you can see all the contributors who were involved in it and comments from all of them. And it has the common agreements, the points of agreement. And then there's a article where Thomas Keating is talking about the experience of interreligious dialogue, and that's from the International Contemplative Outreach site, and all of those newsletters are archived out there. And then A Rising Tide of Silence is the documentary on Father Keating. And that's it. Thank you all, and thank you, Jimmy, for inviting us today.
Thank you, Carol and June. I think you did a fantastic job. I think it started to open up the conversation and approach to what Father Keating was about and what he was teaching. And I want to say welcome to John Brodiziak. Are you still here, John?
Oh yeah, I didn't leave yet, Jimmy. I'm just in the background, kind of watching. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you joined us today. Are you on our mailing list, by the way?
I got an email from you, so I guess that means I'm on some list, but I don't, in terms of physical mailing, U.S. Post, no, I'd rather not be on that because I don't want to spend the money on that, or not money or just the energy. Better to do electronic, in my view.
we're trying to be electronic, but I'm such a naive person when it comes to innocent, ignorant person when it comes to the technology. But with the help of people like Arlene and others, we're sort of muddling our way through.
Yeah, I mean that's the way to go. I mean, it's
I'm glad that you're here.
Reduce carbon impact. Yeah, that's one of the things that's good.
And Jimmy, could I just suggest that anybody, if you'd like to be kept abreast of what's happening with Mindful Hawaii and you're not, just throw your email address and name into the chat, and we'll be sure that you get added to our lists.
Yeah. Loki, are you leaving already? I guess you left.
I didn't leave. I just had to unmute.
Oh.
No, I'm not leaving already. I'm hanging in there.
Yeah,
I just was
usually
kind of multitasking.
have something to share with all of us. I thought maybe you might want to do that, Loki.
Have something to share with everyone?
Yeah, if you want to.
No, just hi, and I look forward to meeting in person again one day.
Oh, great, yeah.
So
it's been a while, huh?
Yeah.
See you with us again, and we hope to see you when we start meeting in person again. Okay?
You will.
And Bev, now that you've shared the secret of being close to the Campbells at some point, you may have some insight about them, and we may be able to arrange something to be presented on our community meeting, by the way. So if you have any thoughts about that, I'd like to hear about that. And Susan Ford, good to see you. It's good that you're not teaching today. I need to talk to you about some conferences that are coming up this year, and that maybe we can get you somehow involved in that through Dr. Luskin's work, I guess. Yeah.
Sure, glad to do that.
Yeah, good. But anyway, we still got a little time, but we can always cut it a little short so we can go about our Saturday afternoon schedules, if you will. But I just want to say that next month we should have a very interesting conversation again with Jan Iwase about leading and educating with aloha, the 2 books she wrote. And of course, Jan is the wife of the former Senator Randy Iwase. And I saw her not too long ago, and she was looking forward to joining us next month. And to Jude and Carol, I want to thank you for coming out to Olelo the other day, but unfortunately we got short-circuited out. There was a power outage, and so we have a new date in May, and I will send the confirmation date with you folks. This is a date that we selected. I think it's the 12th. I think so. I'll get that out to you guys, and we can get together on doing the Olelo show. Other than that, anybody have any questions for me? Your silence is very scary. And Lonnie,
Jimmy,
yes.
a quote from Father Keating. He said, "God speaks to us in silence. Everything else is a poor translation."
Well, thank you, Richard. Yeah. But I'm a human being, you know. I enjoy the noise. And Lonnie, are you still there? Oh, she may have left.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh,
But
Lonnie, well, I hope that we can meet up on the Big Island sometime soon.
okay, well, I live in Kohala. You know, it's away from every place, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, no, I need to talk to my friend, and maybe he can be my chauffeur there.
Okay, anyone is welcome. We are
Yeah.
a very welcoming community, and we have the most economic thrift shop in all of Hawaii.
Oh, really?
Is that an advertisement? And I do need to run, but bless you all. And
Thank you, Lonnie.
mahalo, everybody. Okay.
So we're going to be signing off. So I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us, and aloha. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.